Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And today I'm on Main Street in Boonsboro, Maryland at the newly opened National Road Museum. The National Road, of course, was the first federally funded highway in America. And I'm here with Reuben Moss, the executive director who helped get all this going. Now, if you're saying to yourself, Johns, you're with Baltimore Heritage, not Boonsboro Heritage, what are you doing out there? Let me just say, if you've ever gone to a ball game and you're walking along Lombard Street at Utah, that's the National Road. The National Road started in Baltimore, headed out west to Cumberland, and then west beyond that. Before I turn it over to Reuben, let me say just a few words about that, and we'll start our story in 1806. That's when Congress authorized funds to build a national road in Cumberland heading west. And a good section of that first road was going to follow a path called Nemacolin's Path. Nemacolin was a Delaware Nations leader in the 1750s, helped a group called the Ohio Company build a road out there, which incidentally George Washington walked on and worked on as part of the fated Braddock expedition. They were going to go out and fight the French in today's Pittsburgh. But we're talking about the road, not about George. So 1806, we've got congressional funding. By 1811, things start to get going and the road gets started to be built from Cumberland heading west. It didn't take long for the folks in the General Assembly in Maryland to say, well, if we're going to head west from Cumberland, how about heading east to Baltimore, connecting our port to the road into inland America? And they didn't authorize funding, but they authorized private companies to build toll roads. And what became the Baltimore National Pike was really a series of different toll roads. If you started out in Baltimore heading west, you would be on the Baltimore-Fredericktown Pike, what we call Frederick Road today. Keep going a little further and you were at the Hagerstown-Boonesboro Pike. Keep going a little bit more and you got to the Cumberland Pike, and then to Cumberland, and then you were on the federally funded part of the road. The plan was to keep going to St. Louis and beyond, but the road never got there. If you kept heading west, by 1818, you got to Wheeling, West Virginia. By 1833, you got to the brand new capital of Ohio, Columbus. And by 1837, you got to the then capital of Illinois, Vandalia. But that's when the economic depression hit and Congress stopped funding the road. The road did go west to St. Louis and beyond over the Eads Bridge with state funding and private funding. From the very beginning, the road was a success, something like $400,000 in dry goods packed on Conestoga wagons heading out from Cumberland and then from Baltimore, places like Lexington Market. Along the way, it made people like George Peabody and Johns Hopkins very rich men, and it helped towns along the way either spring up or get going. Towns like Richmond, Indiana, and Springfield, Ohio, the stretch of road that went through their towns became known as Millionaires Road, so people were doing well out there as well. By the 1850s, however, the road saw a little bit of a decline, and that was from another Baltimore thing called the B&O Railroad. As it was laying tracks out west, it was cheaper and faster to go by rail, your goods or yourself, than it was on the road. But the National Road was not down for the count. By the 1920s, a new contraption called the automobile helped revive the road, and in large part led by investors in Baltimore. They led a multi-state effort to get the road improved again, and then for private investment to go into amenities along the road like motels and restaurants for this new thing called the Motor Traveler. I'm going to stop there. There is so much more to cover. We can come back and cover things like finding the original mile markers on the road, visiting some of the inns that were along the road and are still here today, and then, of course, talking about racism along the road and the fight to abolish it. Stay tuned for that, but right now I'm going to turn it over to Reuben Moss. Reuben, we are all yours.
Hi, I'm Reuben Moss. As John said, I am the Executive Director here at the National Road Museum. The National Road Museum here in Boonsboro is now the only museum in Maryland dedicated specifically to this road. So the reason the road is so important here in Boonsboro is actually the fact that we are at the point where the first macadam, the first paved highway in the United States, was tested. John Macadam in Scotland had developed a process of paving using multiple size stones, and it had not been tested here in the United States. So the Hagerstown and Boonesboro Turnpike Company decided to experiment with that process. Despite being one of the most traveled sections on the road, with Boonsboro and Hagerstown both being established communities before the road even came through, it was one of the worst condition areas of the road in the era when the turnpike was just a dirt road. So for a couple years, they hired many Irish workers to build this road with the macadam process just west of Boonsboro and into Hagerstown. The process was so successful and it became such a reliable form of paving that about a decade later, the federal government began to upgrade the national road beyond Cumberland with the same process. So today, the road is considered a national engineering landmark. In the early 2000s, it was made a Maryland Scenic Byway all the way from Baltimore to Cumberland and beyond to Grantsville, where it leaves the state and goes into Pennsylvania. The road has had many nicknames over the years. It was part of the Old Trails Road before the numbering system was put in place in the 1920s, and parts of the Old Trails Road also became the famous Route 66. While that road earned the nickname the Mother Road, our national road became the road that built the nation, which really sums up its importance to the country. Both roads still hold the nickname Main Street of America because of how many towns grew up or developed alongside the road. If you want to learn more about the road or our museum, see what hours we're open here in Boonsboro, and see what other things you can do in our area while you come to visit, visit nationalrdfoundation.org.